After Hurricane Ian hit the nation, there were multiple reports of flooded electric vehicles igniting and going up in flames. Believe it or not, with or without a flood, exploding EVs aren't as uncommon as you may think. Today, I'm going to explain why flooded electric cars catch fire and why EV fires are much harder to extinguish than conventional gasoline-powered cars. Hurricane Ian hit Florida this past September. It was a Category 4 hurricane, and it wreaked a lot of havoc and damage. The hurricane was so huge that in some areas the storm surge reached 16 feet. One estimate found that in the aftermath of Hurricane Ian, as many as 358,000 cars from Florida to the Carolinas had flood damage. But that's not all. There were also multiple reports of Teslas catching on fire as the floodwaters receded. And those weren't the only cars to catch fire after the hurricane. Here's the thing. If your EV was flooded, or if it even gets flooded later on, you just know that according to the National Highway Traffic Safety Association, NHTSA, that any flooded EV should be kept at least 50 feet away from structures, cars, or anything else that can easily catch on fire. Some Floridians learned that the hard way. In one tweet, Florida State Fire Marshal Jimmy Petronas talked about one house that was hit hard on Sanibel Island. The damage was severe, but not because of Hurricane Ian. Rather, the house was damaged after the Tesla in the garage caught on fire from the storm. In the tweet, Petronas showed images of the damaged house, and you can see the smoke rising from the burning Tesla. Fire Marshal Petronas recalled another incident where he watched as the North Collier Fire Rescue Team fought an EV fire that continuously reignited. Yes, that's right. EVs can literally reignite even after being put out. In this particular incident, despite firemen at the scene using tens of thousands of gallons of water to cool the batteries in the EV reignited itself over and over again. He described the first-hand experience as surreal and scary. When the firemen thought they'd finally put out the fire, it lit again with vengeance. And even as the EV was being towed away by a tow truck, it caught itself on fire again. After Hurricane Ian, reports of EV fires got so bad that Florida State Fire Marshal Jimmy Petronas issued a letter to over 30 EV manufacturers. In the letter, Petronas urged EV makers to step up, demonstrate leadership, and partner with the state of Florida and local officials in this recovery. He understood that any EV that had been submerged in hurricane salt water was a fire risk. He added that the unfortunate reality that we see today is that there's a population of vehicles that can spontaneously combust at any moment, and countless first responders are put at risk, not to mention American households. Who knows how many countless more will be put at risk because of spontaneously combusting EVs. Put simply, flooded EVs are like ticking time bombs. Despite all this, Petronas only heard crickets chirping. EV manufacturers were nowhere to be found. I could certainly imagine his frustration. The thing is, human lives are at stake. Secondly, many EV companies receive subsidies from taxpayers. So you'd hope that EV makers would react immediately to acknowledge and address the matter somehow. Naturally, you're wondering, why do they start on fire at all? After all, normally water puts out a fire, it doesn't cause it. Well, here's the thing. There are two parts in play here. First, you have the lithium-ion battery in an EV. Next, you have a hurricane. Hurricanes are the most violent storms on Earth. Typically, they form near the equator over warm ocean waters. And we all know the ocean contains salt water. Now, when salt water gets into a lithium-ion battery, that's bad news. Salt bridges form within the battery pack. All that salt water begins to seriously corrode the battery components and even the wires inside an EV. That then causes a short or even the wiring to get exposed. Once that happens, one simple small spark is all it needs to ignite a fire that quickly engulfs the electric car. Let's put it in perspective. Which is more likely to catch fire, a traditional gas-powered car or an electric car? Most EV manufacturers will tell you their vehicles are no more likely to catch on fire than a gas-powered car. For example, Tesla claims that gas-powered cars are 11 times more likely to catch fire than EVs. But is that the truth? Well, it depends. If we're talking about what's more likely to catch fire after a collision, well, definitely it's a gas-powered car. But if we're talking about which type of car is the most fires reported in general, the answer may surprise you. It's not gas-powered cars. It's not EVs either. Actually, it's hybrid cars. Gas-powered cars are the second most likely to catch fire in general, and EVs are the least likely to catch fire of those three types. When it comes to EVs and hybrids, the batteries are usually the culprit for any fire, not their wiring, at least not in the newer models. Both hybrid and battery electric vehicles, recalls after fires are usually all related to battery issues. On the other hand, gas-powered cars are usually caused by fuel leaks, electrical shorts, or anti-lock braking systems. Now, just because an EV fire is technically less common than gas-powered car fires, that doesn't make them less dangerous. The truth is, EV fires are a whole lot harder to extinguish than fires of a traditional gas-powered car. The reason is, EV chemistries cause far hotter electrical fires that reignite because of the physical properties of the battery housing. Now, the average gas-powered car that catches fire usually takes about 300 gallons to extinguish. But EVs is a different story. Tesla said that anywhere between 3,000 to 8,000 gallons of water can be needed to extinguish the Model S. It's a lot more water. Now, that's what Tesla states officially. But look at a Tesla that caught fire in Houston in April 2021. Houston firefighters needed 28,000 gallons of water to permanently extinguish that fire after it reignited twice. Believe it or not, an EV fire can last for hours before it can be finally put out. Firefighters are still learning the best way to extinguish EV fires. And even when an EV fire gets put out, remember, it can still reignite even after 24 hours, and in some rare cases, even after weeks. Earlier in this year, 2022, a massive cargo ship named the Felicity Ace caught on fire as it was crossing the Atlantic Ocean. The ship burned for days just off the coast of Portugal's Azores Islands until it finally sank. Now, the cause of the massive blaze has not been published officially, but a captain at a nearby port said that the reason the fire lasted so long was because of the special cargo it was carrying on board, which was electric vehicles. We're talking about electric Porsches, Bentleys, and Audis to be exact. Really expensive ones. And there were about 4,000 of them. The lithium-ion batteries inside the EVs basically canceled out any efforts from the tugboats that were spraying the ship with water. Now, we all know that zombies aren't real, but when it comes to Tesla zombies, those are apparently real. I'm talking about the Tesla Model S that was sent to the junkyard for scrapped after a vehicle accident. But then 3 weeks later, the EV came back to life, so to speak, and caught fire. This happened just this past June. The Sacramento Fire Department said it was unclear how or why the EV battery randomly caught itself on fire. Even more interesting is the way the firefighters put out the fire. First, they created a pit with dirt. Then, they placed the Tesla in it and filled the pit with water. The total time it took them to extinguish the fire was over an hour. If you think that's a crazy story, you haven't heard anything yet. It gets crazier. Rewind 2 summers ago in June 2021. It was just another typical Tuesday in Pennsylvania. The $129,900 Tesla Model S Plaid had just been released. Just 3 days after release, a driver took it out on the road, only to notice smoke coming out of the back of the car. Of course, the driver tried to get out of the car, except the electric door system failed. He was stuck. The driver was eventually able to manually force open the door. After he got out, the car continued to move another 35 to 40 feet before it burst in a fireball. It took firemen over 3 whole hours to kill the fire. The reality is that it can happen to almost any EV, regardless of brand. The only reason why people hear about Tesla fires is because Teslas are the highest selling EVs out there. And we see more Teslas on the road than other EVs. That's why when there's an EV fire, with or without a flood, of course, chances are it'll be a Tesla in the United States. The complexity with EV fires has to do with the lithium-ion battery. Right now, it's the most common type of battery to come standard in most electric vehicles. Some EV companies have begun adding exotic materials to their lithium-ion batteries to improve the thermal characteristics and performance. EV companies have been actively looking at solid-state batteries. Evidently, it's supposed to be more stable and less likely to ignite. But let's get back to Hurricane Ian. Believe it or not, reports back from this past October found that some of the cars that were flooded during Hurricane Ian were actually resold. In fact, if you're shopping for a used car, I always suggest you check the car's VIN number to make sure it has no flood history, and if it does, then avoid buying the car. Here's the thing about flooded EVs. There are safety risks that go through the roof. Salt water doesn't just corrode EV batteries, it corrodes all sorts of important parts and components, whether it's an electric car or a gas-powered car. Anyway, if you're wondering how on earth these flooded cars get resold, you can say there's a tiny loophole in the system. If a car was insured when it was damaged and salvaged due to flood, you'll see that in the vehicle history report when you search by the car's VIN. But if the vehicle was not insured, well, this is where things get tricky. In this case, a dishonest owner can quickly clean it up and resell it without documenting any flood damage. So just beware of that when you go car shopping. For some time now, car supply has been low, but demand has been high in both the new and used car markets. Some dealers are very desperate, so desperate that some may even resell these flooded pieces of junk. So let me tell you how to spot a flooded car. First, pop open the hood and look for any rust, corrosion, or brittle wires. Also check the the engine bay for any sand or mud around the engine. That's because flood water brings sand and dirt inside a car and it can be hard to clean out. Also, keep your eyes out for sand or mud under the carpeting. Pick it up and look under it. Look inside the glove compartment and under the seats. Look for water stains, moisture, or mildew on the seat belts. If your used car has brand new upholstery inside, be skeptical and cautious. This can be a warning sign the owner is trying to hide flood damage. Also, look for any moisture, beads, or fog inside the lights. Check under the dash and around the doors for any signs of water damage and rust. If you smell unusual odors, be suspicious. Usually flooded cars smell musty or moldy. Or if it smells strongly of cleaning solutions, the owner might be trying to mask the mildew smell. Also, run the air conditioner to see if it produces a moldy smell. Another tip is to check for engine smoke. Smoke should be a concern for any used car, but engine smoke is even more serious if you suspect the car was flooded. If you hear odd noises from the brakes or steering wheel, this too can indicate that sand or dirt has gotten into the system. But now you tell me, have you ever survived the flood or EV fire? Please share by commenting below. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for your support.